Before you watch another survival video that tells you to stockpile water and learn fire starting techniques, stop. Because what actually kills people in emergencies isn't what you think. The manuals don't tell you the truth. The courses skip the uncomfortable parts. And most preppers are preparing for the wrong threats entirely. If you're serious about making it when systems collapse, when society fractures, when everything you rely on disappears, then you need to understand the silent rules. These are the principles that separate the survivors from the statistics. The unspoken truths that experienced operators know but rarely share. And if you want this knowledge, if you want to be among the prepared few who actually make it through, then subscribe now, because this channel doesn't sugarcoat survival. We teach what works when everything else fails. Let's start with the first silent rule, the one that kills more people in the first 6 hours of any emergency than anything else. Thermal regulation. You've heard about the rule of threes, right? 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Everyone recites it, but here's what they don't tell you. In harsh conditions, you have approximately 3 hours before hypothermia or hyperthermia incapacitates or kills you. Not 3 days, 3 hours. According to wilderness medicine research, exposure kills faster than dehydration, faster than starvation, faster than almost any other threat you'll face. When a hiker gets lost in the mountains and dies overnight, it's not because they starved, it's because their core body temperature dropped below 95 degrees Fahrenheit and their body started shutting down. When someone dies in the desert, it's often because their temperature regulation system failed before severe dehydration set in. The silent rule here is brutal. Shelter and temperature management come before water, before food, before almost everything. Yet most survival kits are packed with food bars and water filters, while shelter materials are an afterthought. In a real emergency, you need to assess your thermal situation within minutes. Are you losing heat? Are you gaining too much heat? What's the wind chill? What's the ground temperature? Your body loses heat through 5 mechanisms: radiation, conduction, convection, evaporation, and respiration. Sitting on cold ground without insulation can drain your core temperature faster than standing in cold air. Getting wet in 40-degree weather can kill you in under 2 hours. The silent rule is this: control your microclimate first, or you won't survive long enough to need that water filter. The second silent rule is about noise discipline, and it's one of the most violated principles in survival preparation. In military operations, in conflict zones, in disaster areas where civil order has collapsed, the people who survive longest are often the quietest. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, the areas that descended into chaos saw violence and looting. People who drew attention to themselves, who made noise, who advertised their presence, became targets. The silent rule is simple. In a degraded security environment, being invisible is more valuable than being armed. This isn't about paranoia. It's about understanding human behavior under stress. When resources become scarce, when law enforcement is absent or overwhelmed, when people are desperate, the loud ones get noticed first. Your generator running at night tells everyone within half a mile that you have power and resources. Your bright lights announce that you're home and possibly stocked with supplies. Your voice carrying across the neighborhood reveals your location and numbers. Experienced operators practice noise discipline as a fundamental skill. They know how to move quietly, how to minimize light signature, how to avoid patterns that draw attention. They understand that in a true collapse scenario, the gray man principle becomes a survival imperative. The gray man concept means blending in, becoming unremarkable, avoiding anything that makes you stand out. No tactical gear in public, no bumper stickers advertising your political views or preparedness mindset, no conversations about your stockpiles or capabilities, because the silent rule is this: operational security determines survival. What people know about you can get you killed. In World War II, the resistance fighters who survived weren't the boldest. They were the quietest, the most disciplined, the ones who understood that every word spoken could be a death sentence. The third silent rule deals with something rarely discussed in survival circles: decision fatigue and mental collapse. In 70% of survival situations, psychological failure precedes physical failure. Your mind quits before your body does. Research from the military's survival schools, from mountaineering accidents, from maritime disasters, shows a consistent pattern. People who should have survived, who had the skills and resources, died because they mentally gave up. They stopped making decisions. They stopped fighting. The technical term is give up itis, and it's real. During the Korean War, prisoners of war died from it. They would sit down, stop eating, stop responding, and within days, they'd be dead. No physical cause. They had simply decided, consciously or not, that survival wasn't worth the effort. The silent rule here is understanding that mental resilience isn't optional. It's the foundation everything else rests on. You can have a bunker full of supplies, but if you can't handle the stress, the uncertainty, the fear, those supplies won't save you. Decision fatigue compounds this. Every choice you make in a crisis drains cognitive resources. Should I stay or go? Which route is safer? How much water can I spare? What sounds am I hearing? The brain gets exhausted from constant threat assessment and decision-making. Studies show that after making numerous decisions under stress, people start making catastrophically bad choices. They take unnecessary risks. They ignore obvious dangers. They quit when they shouldn't. The silent rule is to reduce decision load before crisis hits. Have plans, have protocols, have automatic responses for common scenarios. When the emergency happens, you're not trying to figure out what to do. You're executing a plan you've already thought through. And equally important, you're protecting your mental state. You're maintaining hope, purpose, and routine, because those psychological factors can mean the difference between fighting through hell and lying down to die. The fourth silent rule challenges a deeply embedded myth in survival culture: the lone wolf fantasy. Popular media loves the image of the rugged individualist surviving alone against all odds. It makes for good television. It's also statistically a death sentence. Research from actual survival situations, from the Donner Party to modern wilderness accidents to urban disasters, reveals a consistent pattern. Group survival rates are roughly 300% higher than individual survival rates. When Mount Everest climbers get in trouble, those in groups have dramatically better survival odds than solo climbers. When ships sink, when planes crash, when disasters strike, people in cooperative groups outlast individuals. The reasons are practical and psychological. Groups provide redundancy. If one person gets injured, others can help. Groups provide diverse skills. One person knows first aid, another knows navigation, another knows mechanical repair. Groups provide security. Multiple people can maintain watch rotations, can defend resources, can respond to threats. Groups provide psychological support, reducing the mental collapse risk we just discussed. Yet the silent rule goes deeper than just find others. It's about building the right group before disaster strikes. Random groups of strangers don't function well under stress. They lack trust, shared values, and established leadership. The survival groups that work are built on existing relationships, shared training, and practiced cooperation. In community emergency response team training, in military unit cohesion research, in every serious study of group dynamics under stress, the finding is identical. Groups that trained together, planned together, and built trust before the crisis survived at dramatically higher rates. The silent rule is this: your network is your net worth in survival. But it must be built now, not when the emergency starts, and it must be based on competence and trust, not just proximity or friendship. The fifth silent rule addresses something most preppers completely misunderstand: resource pre-positioning versus load-bearing. The tactical reality is that you cannot carry everything you need for extended survival. The average person can sustainably carry about 25 to 30% of their body weight over distance. For a 180-pound male, that's roughly 45 pounds. For a 130-pound female, that's about 32 pounds. Now try packing water alone. 1 gallon of water weighs 8.3 pounds. 3 days of water for one person is 3 gallons, almost 25 pounds, leaving minimal capacity for shelter, food, first aid, tools, and clothing. The mathematics of load-bearing make the bug-out bag fantasy largely unworkable for extended scenarios. The silent rule that professionals understand is resource pre-positioning. Instead of planning to carry everything, you cache supplies at multiple locations. Not just your home, but at secondary and tertiary locations along likely routes. This isn't hypothetical. Special forces units, resistance networks, and intelligence services have used cache systems for decades. During the Cold War, NATO established stay-behind caches across Europe in case of Soviet invasion. These contained weapons, communications equipment, food, and supplies, buried or hidden at predetermined locations. Modern preppers can apply this principle legally and practically. A cache at a trusted friend's or family member's property in another region provides redundancy. A storage unit in a different city provides options. Even hiding supplies along potential evacuation routes can work, though with legal and practical considerations. The point is diversification and redundancy. If your home becomes untenable, you're not trying to carry everything on your back. You're moving to pre-positioned resources. This requires planning, trust, and operational security. But it's the difference between the fantasy of the bug-out bag and the reality of sustainable survival logistics. The sixth silent rule is about hygiene, and it's killed more people throughout history than warfare. In the American Civil War, for every soldier killed in combat, 2 died of disease. In World War I, typhus, dysentery, and cholera killed millions. In refugee camps, in disaster zones, in any situation where sanitation infrastructure collapses, disease becomes the primary killer. Yet hygiene is rarely emphasized in survival training. People focus on weapons, on fire starting, on shelter building. They don't think about waste disposal, water contamination, or disease vectors. The silent rule is brutal. In an extended emergency, poor hygiene will kill you more certainly than lack of food. Cholera can kill in hours through dehydration from diarrhea. Typhoid spreads through contaminated water and food. Dysentery turns your intestines into a war zone. Infected wounds become septic, leading to amputations or death. And all of this is preventable with basic hygiene protocols. Hand washing with soap or sanitizer before eating and after defecation. Proper human waste disposal at least 200 feet from water sources and buried in cat holes 6 to 8 inches deep. Water purification through boiling, filtration, or chemical treatment. Wound cleaning and dressing. Dental hygiene to prevent infections that can become life-threatening. These aren't optional comforts, they're survival necessities. In the 1854 cholera outbreak in London, Dr. John Snow traced the disease to a contaminated water pump. Simply understanding disease transmission saved thousands. In modern disasters, the pattern repeats. After the 2010 Haiti earthquake, cholera spread through contaminated water, killing thousands who survived the initial disaster. The silent rule is this: your hygiene protocols and sanitation systems are as critical as your food and water supplies. Plan for waste disposal. Stock soap, sanitizer, and disinfectant. Understand waterborne and vector-borne diseases, because surviving the initial crisis means nothing if disease kills you 2 weeks later. The seventh silent rule involves something that makes people uncomfortable: operational security and the target you paint on yourself. The preparedness community has a dangerous contradiction. People want to build networks and share information, but they also broadcast their capabilities and resources. They post photos of their stockpiles on social media. They talk about their preparations at work or in public. They wear clothing and display stickers that advertise their mindset. Every piece of information you release creates vulnerability. In a crisis, especially one involving resource scarcity or civil disorder, the prepared become targets. FEMA and disaster response agencies have documented this pattern repeatedly. After hurricanes, after floods, after riots, the homes and people known to have supplies get hit first. Sometimes by desperate neighbors, sometimes by organized looters, sometimes by people you considered friends until resources became scarce. The silent rule is radical operational security. You don't discuss your preparations outside your immediate, trusted circle. You don't advertise your capabilities. You don't display wealth or resources. You practice the gray man principle we discussed earlier. This extends to digital security. Your internet history, your purchase records, your social media posts all create a profile. In a severe enough crisis, that information could be accessed and used. Governments have done it. Criminal organizations have done it. Even neighbors scrolling through old posts could do it. The counter-argument is that community building requires openness. True, but there's a difference between building trusted networks through careful vetting and broadcasting to the world. Share information on a need-to-know basis. Build relationships slowly and verify trust over time. Understand that in a real collapse, some people will remember what you said years ago about your stockpiles or capabilities. The silent rule is this: secrecy is survival. The best prepared person is the one nobody knows is prepared. The eighth silent rule deals with something survival instructors rarely emphasize: the survival paradox of patience versus action. When crisis hits, the immediate instinct is to do something, to move, to act, to flee, to fight. This instinct kills people. In wilderness survival, more people die from moving when they should have stayed put than from staying when they should have moved. They leave the safety of a crashed vehicle to seek help and die of exposure within sight of a road. They abandon a disabled boat to swim for shore and drown before reaching it. They panic and run, getting more lost, expending energy, making themselves harder to find. Search and rescue statistics consistently show that people who stayed in place, conserved energy, and made themselves visible had dramatically higher survival rates. The same principle applies in disaster scenarios. After an earthquake, rushing outside during aftershocks gets people killed by falling debris. After an attack or shooting, running without assessing the situation puts you in the line of fire or into additional threats. In military training, the immediate action drill for ambush is often to assault through the kill zone or take cover, not to flee randomly. The silent rule is understanding when patience saves lives and when action is required. This requires assessment capability. What is the immediate threat? What are the secondary threats? What information do I have? What information do I need? What are my options? Panic eliminates this assessment process. You react without thinking. You move without planning. You act without understanding. And you die unnecessarily. The counterside of this rule is equally important. Analysis paralysis also kills. Some people freeze. They can't make a decision, so they make no decision, and circumstances overwhelm them. The balance is disciplined decision-making. Take the time to assess, but not so much time that the situation deteriorates beyond recovery. Experienced survivors describe this as tactical patience. You're not frozen. You're actively assessing, planning, and preparing. Then you act decisively based on that assessment. The silent rule is this: the person who panics dies first. The person who freezes dies second. The person who assesses and then acts decisively survives. The ninth silent rule challenges another common assumption: the importance of skills over gear. The survival industry sells equipment: knives, tools, kits, gadgets, gear. And equipment matters. But skills depreciate slower than gear. A knife can break, dull, or be lost. The knowledge of how to create cutting tools from stone or bone lasts your lifetime. A lighter can run out of fuel. The skill of bow drill or hand drill friction fire starting works indefinitely. This isn't an argument against equipment. It's an argument for priority. Skills provide redundancy and adaptability that gear cannot. In prisoner of war camps, in concentration camps, in scenarios where people had nothing, skills kept them alive. They knew how to find water by reading vegetation and terrain. They knew which insects and plants were edible. They knew how to construct shelter from debris. They knew how to maintain hygiene with minimal resources. They knew how to navigate without a compass or GPS. More importantly, skills build confidence, and confidence builds mental resilience, which we've already established as critical. When you know you can make fire in any condition, your stress level decreases. When you know you can purify water, find food, treat injuries, and navigate terrain, your psychological advantage is enormous. The silent rule is this: invest in training before you invest in gear. Take wilderness medicine courses. Learn primitive fire skills. Study edible and medicinal plants in your region. Practice navigation with map and compass and by natural indicators. Train in self-defense and tactical awareness. Because when the gear fails, and eventually it will, your skills are what determine survival. And skills have another advantage. They can't be taken from you. Gear can be stolen, lost, or confiscated. Knowledge stays with you. In every survival situation throughout history, from concentration camps to prisoner of war camps to wilderness survival scenarios, the people with deep skills outlasted those who relied on equipment alone. The 10th silent rule addresses something particularly relevant in the modern era: electronic dependence and infrastructure fragility. Most people are completely unaware of how fragile the systems they depend on actually are. The electrical grid in most developed countries operates near capacity with minimal redundancy. A major cyber attack, a coordinated physical attack on key substations, or a severe solar event could cause cascading failures across regions or nations. The 1989 Quebec blackout from a geomagnetic storm knocked out power for 6 million people for 9 hours, and only quick action prevented months-long damage to transformers. A 2013 sniper attack on a California substation caused millions in damage and came frighteningly close to causing a cascading blackout across the region. The grid is more vulnerable than the public realizes. But beyond the grid, consider the systems that depend on it. Water treatment and pumping stations require power. Without electricity, most cities lose water pressure within hours and treated water within days. Sewage systems fail. Gas stations can't pump fuel even if they have supply. Refrigeration stops, meaning food supply collapses within days. Communications infrastructure, including cell towers and internet, relies on backup generators that typically have fuel for 48 to 72 hours. After that, communications go dark unless power is restored. Banking and financial systems become inaccessible. Supply chains, already strained and just-in-time optimized, collapse completely. The silent rule is understanding that modern life is a house of cards built on electrical and digital infrastructure. When that infrastructure fails, and history shows it will eventually, even temporarily, the cascading effects are catastrophic. So the silent rule is preparation for infrastructure-independent survival. Can you purify water without electricity? Can you cook without gas or electric stoves? Can you heat or cool your shelter without HVAC systems? Can you communicate without cell phones or internet? Can you navigate without GPS? Can you access your money without ATMs or credit cards? Can you defend yourself without relying on police response? These aren't paranoid questions. They're practical risk assessments. History is filled with infrastructure collapses. Argentina's economic collapse in 2001, Venezuela's ongoing crisis, Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, Texas during the 2021 winter storm, Lebanon's infrastructure failure. In every case, the people who prepared for infrastructure independence fared dramatically better than those who assumed systems would hold or quickly recover. The 11th and final silent rule is the most uncomfortable: moral flexibility and the decisions you'll have to make. Survival isn't clean, it's not heroic. It's often morally ambiguous and psychologically damaging. In extreme situations, you will face decisions that violate your peacetime ethics. Do you share your limited food with starving strangers, potentially dooming your own family? Do you turn away refugees seeking help when helping them increases your risk? Do you use force, potentially lethal force, to protect resources from desperate people who aren't inherently bad, just starving? History is full of these impossible choices. During the siege of Leningrad, people resorted to cannibalism. During famines, parents abandoned children they couldn't feed. During the Rwandan genocide, people betrayed neighbors to survive. During the Holocaust, prisoners made horrific moral compromises. These aren't indictments of those people. They're illustrations of what extreme survival pressure does to human psychology and morality. The silent rule is that you need to mentally prepare for moral ambiguity now, before crisis forces impossible decisions on you. You need to establish your ethical boundaries in advance. What will you do to survive? What lines won't you cross? What priorities will guide you? Because in the moment, under stress, with adrenaline flooding your system and fear overwhelming your cognition, you won't have the luxury of philosophical consideration. You'll react. And if you haven't prepared mentally, you'll either make a decision you can't live with afterward, or you'll freeze at a critical moment. Military and law enforcement training addresses this through scenario-based conditioning. You rehearse difficult decisions so they're not completely novel when they occur. You discuss the ethics of force, of triage, of resource allocation. You accept that survival sometimes requires hard choices with no good options. The silent rule is this: prepare yourself psychologically for the moral weight of survival. Understand that you may have to make decisions that haunt you. Accept that survival isn't about being a hero, it's about making it through. And recognize that the person who survives a true collapse scenario carries psychological scars that don't heal easily. This isn't meant to discourage preparation, it's meant to prepare you realistically. Survival isn't a camping trip, it's not an adventure, it's brutal, traumatic, and transformative. The people who survive best are those who understand this going in. These are the 11 silent rules, the principles that separate fantasy from reality in survival preparation. Thermal regulation before water, noise discipline and operational security, mental resilience against psychological collapse, group survival over lone wolf fantasy, resource pre-positioning instead of impossible load-bearing, hygiene as disease prevention, radical operational security against becoming a target, tactical patience versus panic or paralysis, skills over gear dependency, preparation for infrastructure collapse, and mental preparation for moral ambiguity. These aren't the rules you'll find in mainstream survival guides. They're not comfortable, they're not marketable, but they're real. They're based on actual survival situations, military operations, historical disasters, and hard-earned lessons written in blood and failure. If you understand these rules, if you internalize them and prepare accordingly, your survival odds increase exponentially. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the pinned comment some guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready. But more than documents, more than gear, more than stockpiles, what you need is the mindset shift these rules represent. Stop preparing for the survival scenario you want and start preparing for the one that's actually likely. Stop buying gear and start building skills. Stop talking about your preparations and start practicing operational security. Stop fantasizing about being the lone wolf hero and start building a trusted network. Stop assuming infrastructure will hold and start preparing for when it doesn't. Because when the comfortable world you know fractures, when the systems fail, when the crisis comes and it's real and it's terrifying and there's no going back, these silent rules will be the difference between making it through and becoming another statistic. Don't just listen. Act, like, comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late. The knowledge that saves lives is worthless if it stays hidden. Spread it to those who'll use it. And prepare like your life depends on it, because one day it will.